When did someone give you an ultimatum? By the time I was 17, I had already raised 8 of my mom's adopted children. You see, my mom was obsessed with social status. Every adoption got her another newspaper article, another 10,000 likes on Facebook. The thing was, she never actually wanted to parent them. That was my job. It all started when I was 9 and she brought home the first baby, a premature infant from Guatemala who needed round-the-clock care. "You're so mature for your age," she'd said, handing me the feeding schedule at 3 a.m. "This will teach you responsibility." Well, I was making the kids packed lunches when she called a family meeting and slid photos across the table. 3 babies from Ukraine, all under 2, one with cerebral palsy. "Mom, I can't do this anymore," I said, voice shaking. "I need to finish school. I've already missed 47 days this year." She tilted her head. "Are you saying you won't help these innocent children?" "I'm saying I'm 17 and exhausted." That night, after everyone was asleep, she came to my room. "Fine, don't help." She showed me their medical files. "But either you care for them," she said quietly, "or they suffer. Your choice." My head spun while I processed what she was saying. She knew I couldn't watch babies suffer, that I would always choose them over me. The next morning I tested the waters. Instead of staying home with Vance, who had the flu, I went to first period. Just one class. When I got home, I found my 4-year-old brother Danny on the kitchen floor, shaking. He's diabetic and his blood sugar was 32. Mom was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Oh no," she said, not looking up. "I completely forgot his insulin schedule. Guess that's just what happens when you choose to be selfish." That afternoon, I tried telling my school counselor. I didn't even finish the sentence before my phone buzzed. Mom's text. "Gigi's inhaler seems to be missing. Help me look when you get home." I ran home and found Mom holding the inhaler, examining it like she'd never seen one before. "Found it," she said cheerfully. "Accidents happen when you're not here to prevent them, don't they?" But the worst part was what I walked in on that evening. Mom had all the kids who could talk sitting in a circle. "Remember," she was saying in her sweet voice, "if anyone ever asks, I'm the best mommy ever. Because if you say anything else, they'll take you away and you'll never see each other again." 6-year-old Gigi was crying. "But you're mean to Talia." "My name." Mom's face went cold. "Talia wants to abandon you. I'm the only one keeping this family together. Now what do we say if someone asks?" The children chorused in tiny, terrified voices. "You're the best mommy ever." She made them practice it 5 more times before bed. I stopped fighting after that. If she wanted me to give it my all, I would do exactly that. I dropped out of school. Not officially, just stopped going. And when I did show up, I brought the toddlers. "These are mine," I told my chemistry teacher when she asked why I was bringing children to learn about the periodic table. I sold her jewelry to buy formula and kept every receipt. I used her credit card at the pharmacy. Let them flag it for fraud when a teenager bought $400 of prescription medications. 2 weeks later, she announced she was adopting premature twins with serious heart defects. "They need surgery within 6 months or they won't survive," she said at dinner, like she was discussing the weather. "The adoption agency needs proof of a full-time caregiver." She looked right at me. "I told them you'd deferred college." The next morning, she left for a 5-day charity retreat in the Bahamas. Just left a note on the counter with the twins' feeding schedule. One was on a heart monitor that beeped if his oxygen dropped below 90. It dropped every hour. Then Franticia, our 3-year-old, had a seizure in the bathtub while I was trying to cool the babies down. I called 911 with a baby under each arm, Franticia convulsing on the bathroom floor. The paramedics found me sobbing, covered in vomit with 14 kids. The twins' monitor shrieking. "Where are your parents?" they asked. I showed them Mom's text from the Bahamas. "Handle it. That's what you're for. Don't call again. I'm in a meditation session." The hospital social worker pulled me aside the next day. She had a file 3 inches thick. 47 ER visits in 2 years. All brought by me. Mom was never present. "She's getting an award tomorrow," I told the social worker. "Mother of the Decade, televised." The social worker's face was grim. "We've been building this case for months. Your teacher, the paramedics, the pharmacy, even your neighbors. Everyone saw it but couldn't prove it until now." She paused, studying my face. "Did you know she's been collecting $11,000 a month in adoption subsidies?" I felt my knees buckle. 11,000. While I sold her jewelry for formula. That's when I realized. The system couldn't give me justice. And my mom forgot one crucial detail. When you take everything from someone, they've got nothing left to lose. And everything to gain. I walked to the hospital cafeteria after Althea left and bought the cheapest coffee they had. The twins were still upstairs in the NICU with tubes and monitors everywhere. I sat there for an hour watching steam rise from the cup and made my choice. I was done protecting Mom and done letting her use these kids as props. I found Althea's card in my pocket and called her from the lobby. She picked up on the first ring like she'd been waiting. I told her I'd help with everything, give them whatever they needed. She let out this long breath and said she'd been hoping for months I'd be ready. We set up a meeting for the next morning at 9 a.m. That night I couldn't sleep, so I pulled out the old shoebox from under my bed where I'd been keeping things. Every receipt from when I sold Mom's jewelry for formula was there. Every text she sent from vacation while kids were sick. Every photo I took at the hospital alone with crying babies. My hands shook as I sorted them into piles by date. 3 years of proof that she'd abandoned us over and over. I made copies on the printer and put the originals in a plastic bag. The next morning I got the older kids breakfast and told them I had a doctor's appointment. I met Althea in the same hospital conference room, and she had someone new with her. Fletcher Kent from CPS shook my hand and started asking about each kid's medical needs. He had a notebook and wrote down everything about Danny's diabetes and Gigi's asthma and the twins' heart problems. He wanted to know exact medication schedules and which hospitals we'd been to. Fletcher explained that even with the twins in critical condition, they needed more to move fast. Mom's public image was too strong and she had too many supporters. The system moved slow unless they had something nobody could argue with. I pulled out my phone and started showing them everything. Photos of me alone at every appointment with timestamps showing Mom was posting from beaches. Screenshots of her texts telling me to handle emergencies while she was at parties. Videos I'd taken of the younger kids crying and begging for food while she was gone. Fletcher's face got darker with each thing he looked at. He asked if he could make copies and I handed him the phone. After the meeting, I walked to Minnie's house next door. She'd lived there 20 years and seen everything. I asked if she'd be willing to be an emergency contact for the kids. She didn't even hesitate before saying yes. She told me she'd been watching ambulances pull up to our house for years and wondering when someone would do something. 2 days later, Mom came home early from the Bahamas with shopping bags from the duty-free store. She had that fake sweet voice she used after she'd been gone too long. She kept touching my shoulder and playing with my hair and promising we'd go somewhere nice after her award ceremony next week. I could tell she knew something was different by how I looked at her. She started talking about how tired she was and how much she needed my help. That evening after dinner, she gathered the younger kids in the living room. I stood in the kitchen doorway with my phone recording behind my back. She made them sit in a circle and practice what to say if anyone asked about our family. They had to repeat that Mommy takes such good care of them over and over. Gigi started crying because she didn't want to lie. Mom's voice got cold and she said Gigi might have to go live somewhere else if she couldn't remember her lines. The other kids got scared and started saying it louder. She made them practice for 30 minutes until they all said it perfectly with big smiles. The next day, I went to the school for the first time in 2 weeks. I found Dean McCormick in his chemistry classroom during lunch. I asked if he'd write down everything about the times I brought toddlers to his class. He said he'd already been keeping notes because he was worried about me. He showed me a folder with dates of every absence and photos he'd taken of me doing homework with babies on my lap. He said he'd write whatever statement I needed and had been waiting for someone to ask. My whole body felt lighter walking out of his classroom. People were finally seeing what had been happening. The evidence was everywhere and I wasn't crazy or alone. Mom had been so careful about her image, but she forgot that other people had eyes. They saw me at the pharmacy buying hundreds of dollars of medicine. They saw me at the food bank with a wagon full of kids. They saw the ambulances and the police and me carrying sick babies to the ER at 3 in the morning. Fletcher called that afternoon to say they were building the case, but it would take time. The wheels were turning, but the system moved like it was stuck in mud. Meanwhile, the twins needed surgery soon, and Mom was planning her big award ceremony like nothing was wrong. I knew this was just the beginning of a long fight, but at least I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The next morning, I walked straight to the counselor's office at the school before first period. Charity Neely looked up from her computer when I knocked on her doorframe. She waved me in and closed the door behind me. I sat in the chair across from her desk while she pulled out a thick folder with my name on it. She opened it and spread papers across her desk. Each page had dates and times written in her neat handwriting. She showed me attendance records going back 3 years. Red marks covered almost half the days. She had notes about every time I fell asleep in class, every test I missed, every assignment turned in late with baby's handprints on the edges. She'd been tracking everything since freshman year. She pointed to a column where she'd written the reasons I gave for each absence. Medical emergency, hospital visit, sick sibling, doctor appointment. The pattern was obvious when you saw it all together. She told me she'd been worried about me for years but couldn't prove anything until now. She said she'd already written a statement for CPS and would testify if needed. I took pictures of every page with my phone. That afternoon, I drove to the fire station on Maple Street. Roy Farmer was washing one of the ambulances when I pulled up. He recognized me right away and put down the hose. We'd seen each other so many times at my house that we didn't need introductions. He called his partner over, and they both sat with me on the bumper of the truck. Roy pulled out his phone and showed me pictures he'd taken at our house. Mom's car in the driveway while I loaded kids into ambulances. Timestamps showing 2 a.m., 4 a.m., midnight. He said they'd been filing reports for 2 years about her never being present during emergencies. His partner showed me their call log. Our address appeared 47 times. Roy said they'd both provide official statements and testify about what they'd seen. They gave me copies of their reports before I left. The next day, I met Cornelius Bush at the legal aid office downtown. The waiting room smelled like old coffee and copy paper. He was younger than I expected with a messy desk covered in case files. He explained that using Mom's credit cards could get me charged with fraud. The total was over $4,000 just at pharmacies. He showed me the penalty guidelines. I could face jail time if Mom pressed charges. But he said if I cooperated fully with CPS, they'd probably focus on the bigger issue. Child endangerment was more serious than credit card fraud. He helped me write down every purchase I'd made. Formula, medicine, diapers, nebulizer supplies, glucose tablets. I had receipts for most of it in a shoebox at home. He said to get them all organized and make copies. He'd argue that I had no choice but to use the cards for medical necessities. That evening, I looked up Fiona Bailey's number from one of Mom's newspaper clippings. My hands shook as I dialed. She answered on the third ring. I told her who I was and that I had information about Mom's adoptions. She got quiet when I mentioned documentation. She said she'd written 6 articles about Mom over the years, all positive stories about her charity work. I told her about the $11,000 monthly subsidies, about Mom being in the Bahamas during medical emergencies. She sounded skeptical and said she'd need proof before considering any story. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop the next day to review what I had. I couldn't sleep that night thinking about what might happen to the kids. At 3 a.m., I got up and started packing bags. I found old backpacks and duffel bags in the garage. For each child, I packed their medications in labeled bags, their medical records in folders, a change of clothes that actually fit, their favorite stuffed animal or blanket. I wrote their names on index cards with my phone number. My hands shook thinking about them being separated. Danny's diabetes supplies filled a whole bag. The twins' heart medications and monitors took up another. Gigi's inhaler and allergy pens. Frantisha's seizure medication. I lined up all 14 bags by the front door. Each one broke my heart a little more. The phone rang at 7 a.m. while I was making breakfast. Fletcher's voice sounded tired but focused. He told me they were planning everything around Mom's award ceremony in 2 weeks. The timing would work perfectly. She'd be on stage accepting her award when CPS moved in. She wouldn't have time to coach the kids or spin the story. The media would be there already. The truth would come out before she could control it. He said keeping the children safe was the priority. Everything else would follow from that. Mom must have sensed something because that afternoon she changed all the locks on her bedroom door. She moved every medication into her room and installed a padlock. She said I'd been forgetful lately and couldn't be trusted with important things. Then she got on Facebook and posted about how exhausted she was, how I'd been acting strange and aggressive, how hard it was to care for 14 special needs children alone. Her followers immediately started commenting with hearts and prayers. Some said I sounded like a troubled teen who didn't appreciate everything she did. That night, one of the twins' oxygen monitors started beeping at 2 a.m. The backup battery had died and the main unit was failing. His oxygen level dropped to 82, then 79. I ran to Mom's door, but it was locked. I could hear her TV on inside. I banged on the door and yelled that the baby needed help. She didn't answer. I called Minnie and she came over in her nightgown. Together we moved the twin to the other monitor and got his levels back up. I took pictures of the broken monitor and the locked door. I recorded the sounds of Mom's TV playing while we worked to save the baby. Minnie stayed until morning to help watch the monitors. 2 days later, Fletcher called again. He said the legal process was moving slowly. Too many cases and not enough workers. He needed me to make a detailed video statement. He sent me a list of topics to cover. Each child's medical condition, Mom's patterns of leaving, the coaching sessions, the locked medications, the money. I spent 3 hours that night talking to my phone camera. I went through every child's needs, every hospital visit, every time Mom left us alone, every threat she made, every time she chose Facebook over feeding schedules. My voice cracked talking about finding Danny on the floor, about Frantisha's seizure, about the twins almost dying. I uploaded the video to 3 different cloud services and sent Fletcher the links. The next morning, Fiona Bailey called back. She'd reviewed the evidence I'd sent but wanted more. She needed timestamps that could be verified, third-party confirmation, official documents. I spent the day gathering everything. Mom's Instagram posts from the Bahamas tagged with locations and times, the same dates and times as ER admission records. Photos from her Facebook showing her at charity galas while I was at the hospital. Credit card statements showing purchases at resorts while medical bills piled up. I sent everything to Fiona with the paramedics' reports and the social worker's notes. She called back an hour later. Her voice was different this time. She believed me. The next morning I couldn't sleep, so I went through the mail pile on the kitchen counter while everyone was still in bed. Between the medical bills and donation thank you cards, I found a thick envelope from the state adoption agency. My hands shook as I opened it and saw the subsidy payment statements going back 3 years. $11,000 every single month deposited directly into Mom's account. I took photos of every page with my phone, my stomach churning as I did the math. She'd gotten over $400,000 while I sold her jewelry at pawn shops to buy formula and begged pharmacists to let me pay in installments. I heard her bedroom door open and quickly stuffed the papers back in the envelope. That afternoon, while I was giving the twins their breathing treatments, Mom posted on Facebook about how worried she was about me. She wrote that I'd been acting troubled lately and seemed jealous of the attention she gave the younger children. Within an hour, her followers were attacking me in the comments, calling me selfish and ungrateful and saying I didn't deserve such a loving mother. My phone buzzed with notifications until I had to make all my accounts private. I packed a bag that night with backup medications and inhalers and walked it over to Minnie's house after Mom went to bed. She helped me hide everything in her hall closet without asking questions. Having those emergency supplies there made me feel like I had at least a tiny bit of control over this chaos. 2 days later, Mom called a family meeting and announced she was thinking about placing the twins in medical foster care where they could get better specialized attention. The other kids started crying immediately, and Vance grabbed my leg so hard it hurt. I told them I wouldn't let anyone split them up even though I had no idea how I'd stop it. Mom smiled at me over their heads like she'd won something. Cornelius Bush from Legal Aid called me the next morning and said we needed to talk about the credit card charges. He warned me I could face serious charges for fraud, but said if I was completely transparent about everything it would help. We spent 3 hours creating a spreadsheet showing every single purchase with receipts proving it all went to the children's medical needs. He said the restitution plan would show the court I wasn't trying to steal anything. I went to the CPS office that afternoon and spent 4 hours writing out a formal sworn statement. I included every date and time I could remember, names of all the witnesses who'd seen things and details about each child's medical conditions. Fletcher read through it as I wrote and said it was the most detailed report he'd ever seen. He said it would definitely help expedite the case through the system. 3 days later, Mom staged another charity photo op in our front yard with a photographer from the local paper. I stood in the doorway with my phone recording as she posed with the kids for 20 minutes. The second the photographer left, she pulled out her phone and started scrolling while Danny sat on the grass next to her. I kept filming as his hands started shaking and he told her he felt funny. She didn't even look up until the photographer came back for his lens cap and pointed out that Danny looked sick. When I reviewed the footage that night, it looked bad, but any decent lawyer could explain it away. She'd just say she was tired from caring for so many kids, or that she was checking their medical schedules on her phone. I needed something absolutely undeniable that couldn't be twisted or explained. Then I remembered we had a shared family account for tracking our phones in case someone got lost. I logged in and pulled up Mom's location history for the past year. My heart raced as I matched the timestamps to my calendar. She was in the Bahamas during 5 different ER visits, at a spa during Danny's diabetic crisis, at parties and restaurants during 8 other medical emergencies. Every timestamp matched perfectly with the hospital admission records I'd been keeping. I screenshot everything and sent it to Fletcher and Fiona immediately. The next morning, Minnie came over with a folder and said she wanted to help. Inside was a notarized statement she'd written about everything she'd witnessed over the past 2 years. She described hearing the children being coached through our shared wall and seeing ambulances at our house at least twice a week. She'd documented finding Vance wandering alone in her backyard while Mom's car was clearly in our driveway. She even had dates and times for everything. I hugged her and cried for the first time in weeks. The next day, Dean called me to his classroom after school and handed me a thick manila folder. Inside were copies of every absence slip, every tardy notice, and photos he'd taken with his phone of me sleeping at my desk with Gigi on my lap. Charity was already there with her own stack of papers, showing the 47 days I'd missed just this year, plus all the times I'd brought toddlers to the school. They'd been working together for weeks, creating a timeline that matched perfectly with the hospital records I'd given Fletcher. Dean showed me pictures on his phone from 3 months ago when I'd brought Danny to chemistry class because his blood sugar was unstable. The timestamp on one photo showed me checking his levels while other students were doing a lab experiment. Charity had written notes in the margins of attendance records about finding me in the bathroom trying to calm Vance down during his asthma attack. She'd documented everything, even the time she found me changing one of the twins' diapers in the counseling office because I couldn't leave them alone at home. They made copies of everything and said they'd send it directly to Fletcher and the judge handling the case. My phone rang while I was walking home and it was Althea, sounding frustrated. The hospital's lawyers were reviewing her statement, but they wanted to remove certain details about specific medical incidents because of privacy laws. She said this could push back the emergency hearing by at least a week, maybe more. The legal department was worried about liability if they released too much information without proper court orders. I could hear papers shuffling in the background as she explained that even though I was the one who brought the kids in, Mom was still their legal guardian on paper. They needed special permission to release full medical records, and that meant more paperwork, more waiting, more time for the kids to suffer. When I got home, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table with all the receipts I'd hidden spread out in front of her. She didn't yell or scream, just looked at me with this cold expression and reminded me the award ceremony was in 4 days. Her voice stayed quiet and calm as she explained exactly what would happen if I embarrassed her in any way. She'd already talked to lawyers about getting a restraining order against me for theft and fraud. She had the credit card statements showing thousands in charges I'd made. She said the judge would believe a mother trying to protect her children from a troubled teenager who stole from her own family. If I ruined her moment, she'd make sure I never saw any of the kids again, not even supervised visits. She'd tell them I abandoned them, that I never really loved them, that I was just using them for attention. The next morning I went to the electronics store and bought a cheap prepaid phone with cash I'd been saving from returning bottles and cans. I spent hours uploading every photo, every video, every screenshot to 3 different cloud accounts. I created new email addresses and shared the passwords with Althea and Fletcher, writing them down on paper too in case something happened to the digital copies. If Mom took my regular phone or tried to delete anything, copies would exist in places she couldn't reach. I even mailed a USB drive to Cornelius's office with everything backed up, just to be safe. 2 days later, CPS called to schedule a home visit for the next afternoon. Mom went into overdrive, turning our chaotic house into something from a magazine. She scrubbed every surface, organized all the medical supplies into labeled bins, and hung up drawings the kids had made. She spent 3 hours coaching them on what to say, making them practice their answers over and over. I watched her threaten to take away Gigi's favorite stuffed animal if she didn't smile enough. She told Danny that if he mentioned being hungry or sick, she'd blame it on me and I'd go to jail. While she was drilling the kids in the living room, I snuck into my room and grabbed the baby monitor we used for the twins. I hid the parent unit behind some books on the shelf, positioning it to catch audio from where the social worker would probably sit. The next day when the caseworker arrived, the house looked perfect, and the kids performed exactly as trained. They smiled and said Mom was wonderful, that she took such good care of them. The caseworker, a tired-looking woman with a clipboard, asked them specific questions about their medical care. Danny recited his lines about Mom always remembering his insulin, even though his hands were shaking slightly from low blood sugar right then. The baby monitor picked up some of the audio but missed important visual cues like Mom pinching Vance behind his back when he started to say something off script. The caseworker seemed suspicious, writing lots of notes and asking follow-up questions Mom hadn't prepared them for. But without seeing the coaching or threats, she didn't have enough to remove the kids immediately. After she left, Mom celebrated by ordering pizza and letting the kids watch a movie. 2 hours later, Danny collapsed in the hallway. His blood sugar had dropped to 28 and he was barely conscious. I grabbed the glucose tablets from my emergency stash and got 3 into his mouth while checking his levels again. I took photos of the meter showing the dangerous readings, then gave him juice and crackers while documenting everything in the medical log I'd been keeping. Mom was in her room on the phone, telling someone about how well the home visit went. I handled the whole crisis alone, the way I'd handled hundreds before, my body moving automatically through the steps I'd memorized years ago. The next morning, Cornelius called to say he'd filed for an emergency protective order on my behalf. He argued that Mom's threats about keeping me from the kids constituted witness intimidation since I was cooperating with an active investigation. The judge agreed and granted a temporary order that specifically said Mom couldn't prevent me from accessing the children or their medical care. It was supposed to protect me and ensure the kids got the help they needed. That night at 2 a.m., I woke up to my phone buzzing with texts from Mom saying she was sorry, but the door was locked and she couldn't find her keys. I ran downstairs to find myself locked out, all the kids inside and Mom's face in the window with a small smile. She mouthed the word oops and walked away. I called the police and showed them the protective order on my phone. 2 officers showed up 20 minutes later, but Mom answered the door in her pajamas, acting confused and concerned. She said it was all a misunderstanding, that the lock was broken and she'd been trying to fix it. The officers did a quick welfare check on the kids, who were all asleep, and told me this was a civil matter, a family dispute they couldn't get involved in. They left me standing on the porch at 2:45 a.m. with no way to get inside. I sat on the porch steps and called Fletcher over and over, leaving voicemails about hearing the twins' oxygen monitors going off inside. I could hear the beeping through the window, that familiar sound that meant their levels were dropping. Fletcher finally answered at 5 a.m., sounding exhausted but concerned. He promised to expedite everything he could but said no judge would review emergency orders until regular business hours. He told me to document everything, to record what I could hear, to take pictures of myself locked out. So I sat there on the cold porch, recording the sounds of medical alarms inside my own home, while the kids I'd raised were in danger, and I couldn't do anything to help them. The sun came up around 6, and Mom finally opened the door, acting surprised to see me there. She said the lock must have fixed itself, and went back inside while I rushed to check on the twins whose oxygen levels were dangerously low. I got them stabilized and fed all the kids breakfast while Mom stayed in her room posting on social media about how hard it was being a single mother. Later that morning, my phone buzzed with a link from Minnie, and I clicked it to find an article by Fiona Bailey questioning how charity organizations vetted their award recipients. She didn't name Mom directly, but included details about adoption subsidies and medical emergencies that could only be our situation. The comments section was already exploding with people arguing about whether this was about Mom or not. Some defended her as a saint, while others started connecting dots from her social media posts that didn't match up. I screenshot everything before Mom could see it, and kept making lunches while my phone kept buzzing with notifications. Fletcher called me an hour later while I was changing diapers, and his voice was excited. The FOIA request had come through, confirming Mom received the full $11,000 monthly in adoption subsidies. Fiona's sources at the state agency had verified it independently, making this undeniable public record now. I nearly dropped the phone when he told me the total amount she'd collected over 8 years was almost $1 million. He said Jeremy Wolf, the CPS supervisor, had reviewed everything and was authorizing an emergency removal plan that just needed a judge's signature. They'd never seen such comprehensive documentation, and the children were clearly in immediate danger based on the medical records alone. I hung up and saw Mom watching me from the doorway with that cold smile. That afternoon, she gathered all the kids in the living room and announced she'd be live streaming from the award ceremony with everyone present. She called it a celebration of family and said we'd show the world what real love looked like. The younger kids clapped because she'd promised them ice cream, but I saw how she was positioning herself as a victim of jealous attacks online. Her followers were already rallying with hashtags defending her and attacking anyone who questioned her story. She spent hours coaching the kids on what to say if anyone asked them questions at the ceremony. 2 nights before the ceremony, I knew it might be my last chance with all the kids together. After Mom went to bed, I gathered them in my room and taught the older ones our emergency code word, which was butterfly. If I said butterfly, it meant they needed to stay calm and trust that everything would be okay, even if scary things happened. I packed their go bags with their favorite stuffed animals and the blankets that smelled like home. Danny clutched his dinosaur and asked if we were going somewhere, and I told him maybe, but I'd always love him no matter what. The next morning, Mom cornered me in the kitchen and offered me a spot on stage at the ceremony if I would smile and support the family. The manipulation was so obvious now after everything I'd documented and learned. I told her I'd think about it while secretly texting Fletcher to confirm the removal timeline was still on track. He said everything was set, and Judge Melody Painter had agreed to review the case. That afternoon, Charity Neely stopped by with paperwork about getting my GED and mentioned programs for youth aging out of care. I was skeptical at first because I'd never thought about my own future beyond just surviving each day with the kids. She showed me how I could take classes online and still work while getting my diploma. Mom saw her car in the driveway and came out acting sweet, asking what brought her by. Charity said she was just checking on a former student, and Mom's face got tight before she went back inside. Fletcher called again that evening to tell me Judge Painter had scheduled an emergency hearing for the morning of the award ceremony. He said the timing was perfect because Mom would be too focused on her image to interfere with the children's removal. The hearing was set for 8 in the morning, and the ceremony wasn't until noon, so Mom wouldn't even know what was happening until it was done. I felt sick thinking about the kids being taken, but I knew they needed real medical care and safety. The night before everything was supposed to happen, Mom found the baby monitor I'd hidden in the living room. She destroyed it with a hammer, then posted a video claiming I'd been recording the children inappropriately and needed mental health support. Her followers started a hashtag defending her, but others were asking why she was so angry about being recorded if she had nothing to hide. Some people started digging into old posts and finding inconsistencies in her stories about the adoptions. She spent hours deleting comments and blocking people while the kids watched TV. I texted Minnie asking if she could come over, and she showed up an hour later with soup saying she wanted to help. She stayed up with me the night before the hearing, letting me sleep for 2 hours while she watched the house. When I woke up at 3 in the morning, she made me eat something even though my stomach was in knots. She reminded me that I was saving my siblings' lives, and that took more courage than most people would ever have. We sat on the couch listening to the twins' monitors and waiting for Dawn to come. At 6:30, Cornelius showed up with a stack of papers and made me go through every single credit card charge while Minnie watched the kids. He had me write down exactly what each purchase was for and which child needed it. The diversion program forms were complicated, but he explained that admitting everything up front would help the judge see I was trying to save lives, not steal money. My hands were shaking, so bad I could barely sign my name on the last page. Minnie drove me to the courthouse at 7:45, and we sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes while I threw up twice from nerves. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wood panels and fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. Mom wasn't there yet, but her lawyer was already setting up folders at their table. Fletcher waved me over to sit behind him and showed me the order of how things would go. When Judge Painter came in, she looked exactly like her photo online, except older and more tired. She asked me to come to the witness stand, and I had to put my hand on the Bible, even though my palm was so sweaty it left a mark. For 2 hours, she asked me about every single child and their medical needs, and I knew all the answers without even thinking. I told her about Danny's insulin schedule and Gigi's inhaler and the twins' heart monitors and Frantisha's seizure medication. My voice cracked when I described finding Danny on the floor with his blood sugar at 32, but I kept going. I explained about the coaching sessions where Mom made them practice saying she was the best mommy ever. Fletcher stood up next and started pulling out evidence like a magician doing tricks. He had photos of me at the hospital at 3 in the morning with babies in my arms. He showed texts from Mom in the Bahamas telling me to handle everything myself. The medical records made a stack so high it wobbled when he set it on the judge's desk. He read statements from Roy and Dean and Charity about seeing me miss school to care for sick kids. Even Mom's lawyer looked uncomfortable when Fletcher showed the location data proving Mom was at spas during medical emergencies. Judge Painter's face got harder with each piece of evidence until she looked ready to explode. She didn't even wait for closing arguments before announcing her decision. Every single child would be placed on 72-hour medical hold starting immediately. She ordered emergency placement in homes with medical training and froze Mom's access completely pending investigation. Mom walked in right as the judge was signing the orders, and her face went white, then red, then back to white. She kept her smile though and walked straight to me, whispering that I'd destroyed our family. Her breath smelled like coffee and mint gum, and her fingers dug into my arm hard enough to leave marks. Outside the courthouse, she was already on her phone telling someone the children were just getting routine medical evaluations. She told 3 different reporters it was all a misunderstanding, and she was cooperating fully with authorities. Her ability to lie without blinking was amazing to watch even after everything. The removal started at noon, and it was worse than I imagined. CPS workers and police officers filled our house while the kids cried and grabbed at me. They divided them by medical needs, with the twins going to one specialized home and the others split between 2 more. Danny wouldn't let go of my leg until a worker gently pulled him away and promised he could keep his dinosaur. I rode in a separate van, watching through the back window as my siblings were driven away in different directions. At the award ceremony 3 hours later, Mom showed up in a designer dress acting like nothing happened. Fiona caught her on the red carpet asking about reports of children being removed from her home. Mom laughed and said it was just routine medical checkups that got blown out of proportion by people jealous of her success. But when Fiona asked follow-up questions, Mom's answers started contradicting each other. Other reporters smelled blood in the water and started pressing harder about the removal orders. Mom kept smiling, but you could see cracks forming in her perfect image. That night, a counselor met me at a youth transitional program with intake forms to fill out. The room had 2 beds and a dresser and smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. I sat on the thin mattress filling out paperwork about my medical history and emergency contacts while feeling completely numb. The counselor asked if I needed anything, and I couldn't even think of an answer. She left a folder with program rules and meal times and told me someone would check on me in the morning. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, knowing the kids were scared and separated, but finally getting real medical care. The next day, Cornelius called to say he'd worked out a diversion deal where I'd do community service and pay restitution instead of facing charges. The relief hit me so hard, I had to sit down on the floor of my tiny room. He said the judge understood I was trying to save lives, and the prosecution agreed not to pursue criminal charges if I completed the program. Over the next week, the hospital exams happened, and the results were exactly what we expected. Every single child showed signs of medical neglect, from missed medications to untreated conditions. The twins were scheduled for emergency heart surgery within days of removal. The documentation was so clear that even Mom's expensive lawyer couldn't explain it away. Mom's response was to go nuclear on social media the very next morning. Fletcher texted me screenshots of her posts claiming government overreach and begging her followers to protest outside the CPS building. Within hours, there were dozens of people with signs calling CPS kidnappers and demanding the children be returned. Mom posted videos crying about how her babies were stolen from their loving home. She threatened to sue everyone involved and started a GoFundMe for legal fees that raised $8,000 in the first day. Fletcher called to tell me not to worry because the kids were in secure locations and Mom didn't know where. He said the protests were annoying, but wouldn't change anything since the medical evidence was so strong. I deleted all my social media accounts and focused on getting through each day at the youth program. 2 weeks later, Fletcher picked me up for my first supervised visit at a public park downtown. My hands shook the whole drive there. The moment the van pulled up and the kids saw me through the window, they started screaming my name. Danny broke free from the social worker and ran straight into my arms. Gigi and the others piled on top of us in a giant hug that knocked me onto the grass. I'd brought a backpack full of their favorite snacks, plus the medical charts I'd kept for years showing every medication schedule and doctor visit. The social worker let me give each kid their special treat while we sat on a picnic blanket. Danny's blood sugar was perfect and his cheeks had color for the first time in months. The twins looked bigger already and their breathing sounded clear. We played tag and pushed them on swings, and for 1 hour everything felt almost normal. When it was time to leave, Gigi grabbed my leg and wouldn't let go until I promised I'd see them again soon. Fletcher explained in the car afterward that CPS had found 2 specialized foster homes with medical training. The twins were placed together with a retired pediatric nurse who had experience with heart conditions. The other kids went to a couple who'd fostered medically complex children for 15 years. No relatives could take them since Mom was an only child and had cut off her parents years ago. The foster family seemed to really care based on the reports Fletcher showed me. They'd already scheduled all the missed doctor appointments and gotten the kids into therapy. A month later, I sat in a courtroom for the preliminary hearing wearing the only nice outfit the youth program had. Judge Painter reviewed the evidence for over an hour, while Mom sat at the defendant's table in a designer suit. The judge ordered Mom to undergo psychological evaluation and complete parenting classes before any reunification could be considered. She froze the adoption subsidies pending full review of how the money was spent. Mom would get supervised visits every other week for 2 hours at the CPS office. Mom's lawyer argued for immediate return, but Judge Painter cut him off and said the medical neglect was too severe to ignore. I started GED classes the next week in a small classroom with 5 other kids from the youth program. The teacher was patient when I struggled to focus after months of no school. I also picked up shifts in the hospital cafeteria where this whole thing started. The work was hard and the pay was terrible, but it was honest money that I earned myself. I saved every dollar I could in an envelope under my mattress. Seeing the NICU through the cafeteria windows made me think of the twins, but at least now they were getting real care. Fiona published another article focusing on the kids' medical needs and the foster family's expenses. She interviewed the foster parents who talked about the specialized equipment and medications required. Within days, donations started pouring in for medical supplies and therapy costs. People sent toys and clothes and gift cards for the foster families. Part of me felt weird about strangers caring so much, but mostly I was grateful the kids were getting what they needed. 3 months after that first night in the hospital, I moved into a transitional apartment with help from a housing program. It was just a studio with a tiny kitchen, but it was mine. I started therapy twice a week with a counselor who specialized in family trauma. She taught me to use words like abuse and exploitation instead of making excuses for what Mom did. We worked on a victim impact statement for the court that took weeks to write because I kept minimizing everything. The therapist had to remind me over and over that what happened wasn't normal or okay. At the next supervised park visit, I watched my siblings run around on real playground equipment. Their foster parents had brought them and stayed nearby but gave us space. Danny's diabetes was under control and he'd gained weight. Gigi hadn't had an asthma attack in weeks. The twins were scheduled for surgery next month and the doctors were optimistic. Even the little ones who couldn't talk much seemed calmer and less scared. I pushed them on swings and helped them climb the jungle gym and promised quietly that I'd keep showing up no matter what. For the first time in 8 years, I actually believed things might work out. And that's it, folks. Another shining example of me talking too much. Subscribe if you're brave enough for more of it.